Trump isn't dead this week. Whispers of a dark future. He didn't die.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
All right, so this is a Crisisathon 2025. Let's explain what a Crisisathon is. Okay, we're gonna marathon 3 subjects because we were gone for a month, and we're gonna hot flash. We're gonna zoom zap 3 topics.
Yeah. Zoom zap.
Trump militarized DC.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so he basically sent federal troops in under the auspices of fighting crime, and he federalized the police force in Washington, D.C. This is all brought to the fore an interesting sort of set of grievances that D.C. residents have over not actually being a state, and thus not having the autonomy that comes with being a state. So a lot of the people that are mobilizing against the Trump federal deployment in DC are also sort of raising this demand of make DC a state. But that part aside, essentially, Trump has unloaded his federal goons into the city to basically start arresting people en masse and harassing the homeless and generally sort of partially turning DC into a police state. And there has been, of course, a big backlash from the residents of DC, and the local DC officials have, of course, rejected it. But Trump is insistent.
Trump is claiming that crime is down 100% with his actions. He said that crime is down 100%. There's no more crime in DC.
Yeah. Now, the interesting part about that whole thing was crime, including violent crime, is down across U.S. cities. So there was pretty much no justification for this in the first place, in terms of like the purported justification. Of course, the actual reason is that this is part of Trump's, broad program of carrying out illiberalization of United States democracy, trampling on separation of powers, building autocracy, trampling on civil rights, that kind of thing. So, and so now he's talking about basically doing this in other Democrat-controlled cities under the same auspices. And of course, none of the local officials there accept it. And already residents are organizing plans for protests if it does happen. So yeah, what are your thoughts on all of this?
It's a poop show, as the kids say. I can't say the YouTube.
Yeah,
it's upset if I say a naughty word.
It's a shiitake mushroom show.
Yeah, it's quite amazing how terrible everything has been. It's been awe-inspiring in the most negative way ever. My predictions, Bean's predictions for when he got into office was he will fail to do illiberalization, he'll have a revolving door cabinet, and he won't be able to do a lot of damage. Being underestimated Trump's ability to be Trump, and he has been able to do a lot of damage. So much so that the question will come soon, within the next year or so, whether or not to regard the United States as officially becoming an illiberal democracy, or if a lot of the court opinions hold, because a lot of what the Democratic Party is hoping for is that the court system will push back. It is pushing back right now. DC is suing Trump. Courts are ruling the LA military actions as illegal. Courts were even ruling that some of his tariffs were illegal.
Actually, pretty much all of his tariffs, all of his Liberation Day tariffs. Basically, the only tariffs that haven't been challenged are more limited tariffs and tariff actions that, his authority to carry out is essentially limited by checks and balances. So all of his Liberation Day stuff has been challenged.
Yes. So there is a phenomenon called juristocracy. It's a fun term for the fact that liberal societies have over time relied more and more on its judicial institutions, placing a lot of big questions of governmentality away from the people and elected officials toward courts. So an example of juristocracy would be that a lot of major social progression has come through the Supreme Court. The reason this is an issue is that it actually violates or undermines separation of powers by forcing the judicial branch to make legislative decisions, even though the judicial branch interprets, it doesn't make laws. But by forcing the Supreme Court to rule on gay marriage or abortion or a whole host of things, you're effectively asking the Supreme Court to make laws. Now, this was thought of, ironically, as the liberal advantage. A lot of liberal elites actually thought this was a good thing because it meant that institutionality was working better than before, and, we're keeping those rabble-rousing masses out of the way. And to some credits, the 1,000 asterisks around the word credit there, it has been pushing back on Trump. However, the issue, which was sort of thematic for the issue of broader Madisonian democracy, is what do you do when somebody just restacks the court differently? So juristocracy works well in a liberal society when everything's stacked, all the lower and upper courts are ran by liberals, and they make liberal rulings. If you fire a bunch of these judges and you replace them with illiberal ones, you kind of take an existing concentrated system and you just take advantage of its existing placement and you just change the leadership, and now it works for you. As we know with the Supreme Court, it's stacked in Trump's favor, more or less. The revocation of Roe v. Wade during the Biden administration is evidence that the concept of juristocracy is not epic liberal amazement, and whether or not the U.S. officially becomes an illiberal democracy is going to be dependent on these courts. In that, when the courts rule, the court will say, Trump, you cannot place military in cities. If Trump just defies that action and does it anyway and just ignores the court system, and there is no punishment for his blatant.
His fragrant?
Yeah, sorry, don't bully me.
It smells good?
Come on. We're supposed to be professional.
Okay, good.
Okay, point is, if he can bulldoze the jury system and ignore it, then I think we are on our way. I think the U.S. is on its way to an illiberal democracy. I mean, another thing in tandem to all of this is the redistricting. So because Trump is worried he will lose the midterms, there's a redistricting battle going on everywhere. Texas redistrict, got extra 5 seats. California continues to threaten to redistrict. Whether or not it will is anyone's guess. And a part of this as well is the Democratic Party is lost. They don't know what to do. They're held back by stagnant leadership, and there's all sorts of different factions to, maybe we should have offered people better policies. Maybe we shouldn't have campaigned with Liz Cheney. How did we know that by campaigning with liberal conservatives, we would look lame? How could we have foreseen this? Maybe we shouldn't have kept Kamala from going on podcasts. That makes it look really, it makes it look like our party is out of touch with the American people. Who could have foreseen any of these things? It wasn't Being who foresaw them, because Being was assured that Kamala was going to win, which in hindsight, that was hilarious. But
don't worry, there'll be they're in the middle of the night. There will be a Kamala wave. Don't worry. This was something I was told by a certain someone on election night.
A Kamala wave. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're bullying me. You're continuing to bully me. This. I'm gonna take this to Supreme Court and have a ruling against the bullying. All right. Which you will ignore anyways, like Trump. Anyways, but I think the city of DC is suing Trump over this. Trump is rest assured in his convictions that he will send the military to Chicago, all the blue states. Point is, all of this is to quell dissent, prime the American people for the idea that Trump has control more than any other president, and is completely willing to mobilize against his dissent, and that he is completely primed America for the idea that it is no longer a liberal democracy. It is now it's becoming hungry. And whether or not if America does become an illiberal democracy, well, it's not really an if anymore, it's a when. The question then by that point is, do you get so So there's different severities to this. When right populists, when we enter the liberal democracy phase, the question is, will it get to the ethnocracy phase? So for being, there's 3 phases of right populism in government. There is the initial illiberalization phase. I got to turn an illiberal democracy into an illiberal one. Sometimes this succeeds, sometimes it fails. Bologna in Italy, for example, can't get that, can't really get past that first stage. And then the second stage is consolidated and affirming illiberal democracy. Your party wins all the elections, you win all the elections, and holding it down. And then the third stage is the most terrifying. It is full on apartheid, ethnocracy. It's full on. Not only do we have control of the government, anyone who fits outside of the ethnos is brutalized. Trump's attack on birthright citizenship, in fact, Trump's attack on anybody's citizenship, is not only an example of an attempt at reintroducing ethnocracy, but also introducing like Trump-styled ethnocracy plus I can get rid of whoever I want whenever I feel like it. It's pretty terrifying. And Chuck Schumer assures us, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how many people are tear gassed, no matter how many children scream, we always have the midterms. It's like a couple. They keep fighting. There's a divorce on the horizon. But Chuck Schumer says, look, darling, will always have Vegas. We'll always have our honeymoon. Okay? Just, think of that. And, it's pretty terrifying. There's word on the street that the red states are going to mobilize their own areas, but in those cases, the governors of the red states will be in charge, whereas in the blue states, it'll be Trump more directly. Now, of course, people are saying this is fascism. This is the tip of fascism. No, this is part of process. Being has said for a while now. A lot of people are like, well, this is really bad. How is it not fascism? It's like, when Being said he was a right populist, the fact that you didn't think that was bad in itself is telling, because this is bad enough. It doesn't, this can get worse and still be right populism. And America needs to look at, I've said this before, America needs to look at its own history, look at itself, if it really wants to look for examples, and not look at 20th century Germany for example. Look, Germany is not the only country in the universe to have its democracy topple. Weimar Germany was barely a democracy for most of its life anyways. But yeah, it's pretty spooky, scary, perfect for the fall season. Nothing goes better with a pumpkin spice latte than boots running through my neighborhood. Yep, the leaves are falling and the gunfire is falling. Perfect. All right. Is there anything else you want to say about the Trump city militarization thing?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Is that everything for this subject? I can't think of anything else to talk about. I mean, all right.
Yeah.
The second thing, and this will all be one episode instead of 3 tiny ones, because I'd rather just be one thing anyways. All right, Ukraine. So, despite what people may tell you, that's still a thing, and Russia's still invading it. Despite the fact that the news cycle is 24/7 constant information, there's still an invasion going on. And Piper, would you like to set the stage for what's the new developments there?
Yeah, so basically with okay, so at the start of the Trump administration, one of Trump's delusions was that he was going to end the war in Ukraine within a month or something, right? No, everybody knew that was going to be, or that was never going to happen. So, he tries to force Putin and Zelensky into a deal. The thing is that the war in Ukraine is going on because the Ukrainians and the Russians have nothing to agree on. Russia wants to make the territorial losses to Ukraine, or of Ukraine to Russia since 2014 permanent, wants to ensure that Ukraine has no security guarantees from the West and that Ukraine never joins NATO. Ukraine rejects all of that and demands its ability to integrate into Western Europe geopolitically and geoculturally without Russia's approval. And, and of course, demands that its territory be given back to it. So there's nothing to agree on between, Putin and Zelensky. So there's no deal to be made. Trump figured this out. He got, the hard way. He got frustrated. He took it out on Zelensky by pausing military support for Ukraine, which meant that Ukraine wasn't receiving the Patriot air defense systems that it needed to defend itself against Russian drones. And so recently there have been a lot of Russian drone attacks on Ukraine, including in residential areas. And Trump threatened second sanctions on Putin, meaning that, basically he'd add, more sanctions on top of what Russia already faces from the West. And so, Trump gave Putin a deadline to meet for those second sanctions. Putin blew past that deadline and got away with it because he and Trump had a warm little meeting after the deadline expired. And so, Trump having, not having enough of a spine to carry out the threat, essentially, forgot about it. Right. Had Putin called Trump's bluff, and it was successful for Putin. In order to make progress towards a possible deal, Trump has mended fences with Zelensky, and Ukraine has authorized the renewed military aid that is basically facilitated by the Western European countries. The United States will basically sell the military equipment to Western European countries, and then they'll deliver it to Ukraine. But anyway, so Trump's turned on the faucet of military support again. He met with Putin and let the deadline lapse without doing anything. And he had a separate, meeting with Zelensky and the West European leaders. And then the matter has basically been dropped since then. And so some analysts are basically saying, okay, now Trump's washing his hands with the whole thing, having been completely unable to affect anything like a quote unquote deal. And, it's basically just a giant blunder for Trump. For Russia and Ukraine, it means that there's probably not a political or diplomatic solution to this in sight, and they're going to keep fighting each other, which is, a humanitarian disaster. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. Millions have been displaced. Russia has committed probable war crimes in places like Bucha, Ukraine. So, essentially the meat grinder continues. That's the byline.
The meat grinder continues. That's the byline.
Yeah.
Well, what a coincidence, because we have a sponsor. This video is sponsored by Happy Cow Meatballs that fit inside your ears to let you sleep at night. You shove triangular shaped meatballs in your ears, and you hate it when you're like, I can't sleep and my ears are lonely. They need greasy meat. And you go, and you're like, I wish there was a product where I could just shove greasy, disgusting meat in my ear, wake up with an anthill over my face with ants just making a whole colony out of my ear canal. Why does that exist? Happy cow triangular meat ear. I don't know. It's called something. I couldn't think of anything. Yeah, so Trump keeps doing this like, I'm going to solve the war. He'll meet with Zelensky. He'll be like, yeah, Putin's a bad guy. He'll meet with Putin. Putin will be like, Trump, do such a good job. And Trump will come back, Zelensky's the bad one. So the diplomacy has been whoever talks to him last nicely. Like, during the Canadian election that happened recently, Polyair, Pouvla, whatever, dissed Trump. And so Trump was like, I hope Mark Carney wins. Keir Starmer just is nice to Trump. And he's like, oh, Keir Starmer's great. I want to also talk about, as an addendum to this, that the recent season of South Park, which is parodying Trump directly, it's fine. It's South Park. I would like everyone to stop saying South Park has and always was a left-wing show. South Park is painfully center-left. It's painfully a cent-lib show.
Yeah.
Matt and Trey have called themselves libertarians. It's no. Please stop telling me that Matt and Trey Parker are epic leftists doing epic renegade rebellion against the Trump administration by having him act like the Saddam Hussein character doing it with Satan.
Yeah.
It's as much rebellion as it was during their parody of the Bush administration and Osama bin Laden during the 2000s. It was as effective as that was.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was my side, and it's only relevant because I brought up the fact that whoever Trump talks to last and is nice, whoever's nice to him last, he's and that's parodied on the show. Or in one of the recent episodes, people kept giving him like nice things and saying how big his member was, and then like the day later, there's footage of like, was it Qatar giving him a gift and being like, "You're a great guy, you're a great and it's just we can't. Satire is dead. Oh,
Yeah.
parody is dead. Do you think that Ukraine will lose territory out of this, or do you think it'll hold out long enough for Russia to give up?
Well, so there's something to be clarified there. So they've already lost territory, right? The Crimea is under Russian control. There's a bunch of provinces that Russia held, like fraudulent referendums to join Russia. There's the territory they've taken in the war. So there's a question of, is that going to be permanent? And then there's another question of, is Russia going to take more territory? So which of those do you want my opinion on?
Well, just both. Just let's go over all of it. We have enough time.
Okay, so is the territory going to be permanent? I mean, it sort of looks that way to me. The thing that nobody talks about with regard to the Ukraine war is that the lead up to the war between Russia and Ukraine was essentially a cultural civil war within Ukraine itself, between East and West. So, since Maidan, there's been this cultural rift between East Ukraine and West Ukraine, where the West Ukrainians want to join Europe and be part of liberal democratic European civilization, and then the East Ukrainians want to join back up with Russia, like essentially. And as a result of that sort of fight, and there's actually like military struggles between both sides in that conflict. That essentially civil war is what allowed for Russia to go in and to annex Crimea and to create the separatist republics in Donetsk and Luhansk. And I think there might be another few separatist republics, but they create the separatist republics, famously Donetsk and Luhansk. And so because of that, Russia, in taking all of that territory, has the force of the eastern side of the civil war behind it. And so the idea that Ukraine is just going to somehow culturally reunify and take all of that territory back under its sovereign control, that seems pretty far-fetched to me at this point. It seems like in any future deal, they're probably going to have to make some very painful territorial concessions, unfortunately. But in terms of will Russia take more territory? I mean, I think Russia will be able to hold on to Crimea. I think it'll be able to hold on to the separatist republics. Maybe it'll be able to hold on to the territory it's taken in, some of the territory it's taken in the war, and these like provinces that it's absorbed through fraudulent referendums. There's some wiggle room there. I don't think Russia will be able to like knock off the Ukrainian regime. That's what they wanted to do. Clearly, the West Europeans aren't going to let them do that. The West Europeans and NATO aren't going to let them knock off the Ukrainian regime. So, they're probably not ultimately going to get that goal. I mean, my sort of prediction, I guess, is that Russia's going to basically incorporate a bunch of that territory that I was talking about into Russia, sort of on a permanent basis, and that's going to be enshrined in whatever future deal happens. And then, nevertheless, the a hostile Ukrainian regime, a Ukrainian regime hostile to Russia and friendly to Europe, will remain in the rest of the country. That's my prediction. But yeah.
My prediction is that the Hoi 4 player currently playing Ukraine will whip out some hotkey, /J, and will overnight annex half of Russia, and the rest of Russia will be puppeted as Russian Ukraine, because that's how geopolitics works. It's a game of hearts of iron. Realistically, I think the only path is that it'll lose territory and also try to, like, the only deal I see the only deal I see is like, okay, we concede this lands, but we become a member of EU and NATO, so that
Yeah.
the rest, something like that. That seems like, because it's usually, what do they say? The best deals are the ones where nobody wins.
Yeah.
That's what I thought Trump was gonna do, but no.
Yeah, I mean, the big obstacle in Trump's way was that nobody on either side is willing to do that yet. Like, the Ukrainians still don't want to accept territorial concessions or limits on their integration with the West, and Russia doesn't want to allow them to do any of that. So, like, pretty much, like, nobody, like, they're basically insistent on fighting each other at this point. The both of them would like the war to end, but on their own terms. They're not willing to accept it on anything other but their terms. So there's no basis for a deal. And as such, for now, it's going to be a battlefield matter, unfortunately.
You know what else?
Excuse me.
Oh my God, you're not excused. The anarchist position has been take no state's side, always take the side of the people who are oppressed. So I take the side, my side is with Ukrainians getting pulverized and Russians getting pulverized by sanctions and all sorts of things. And also a lot of Russians getting forced into the battle, like a lot of forced into the front lines and can't turn back or they get shot. All of the Ukrainian civilians that have been like blasted. So yeah, I guess does that do everything for Ukraine?
I think so.
All right. What's up with Sudan?
Yeah, so okay. So hold on, let me just get some numbers here.
You didn't have the numbers out already?
No, I do, but Wikipedia is confusing. So
you're using Wikipedia. What kind of hack podcasters? What kind of show are you running? What kind of circus?
I'm using it to remember numbers, bro.
What kind of potato elephant?
Calm your pants.
You not show my pants. You call my big pants.
What are you talking about?
The being has big pants.
Oh, I thought you said pants. I'm like, what are pants?
No.
Wikipedia, just have the numbers in one centralized place, you fool.
I thought us anarchists were against centralization. What's going on here?
So, Sudan, the Sudanese Civil War, right? So, this conflict is well, we'll put it this way. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. And it's a humanitarian catastrophe that has largely been ignored by the Western media. Essentially, it goes back to the fall of Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir. He was a long-running dictator of Sudan. Sudan, like, most African countries, has been beset by coups and dictatorship and instability because of the legacy of colonialism. And so for a very long time, Bashir was the dictator-in-chief. He committed genocide in Darfur. And at the end of the 2010s, 2018 to 2019, basically the Sudanese had decided that they had enough of him. And there were large pro-democracy protests that ousted him. As a result of that, there was then an attempt in the early 2020s to create transition to civilian rule. And that, of course, was a process that was being mediated by civilian officials along with the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces, which were basically an Arab Sudanese auxiliary force for Bashir. They were involved in the genocide in Darfur, and what happened because during that process of transition is that the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces (RSF) decided that they were going to essentially make a power play and carried out a military coup and ousted the civilian caretaker officials and destroyed the caretaker, or basically ended the caretaker regime. And then, because they were both interested in power for themselves, not sharing it with each other, they essentially declared war on each other. Basically, right? I believe it was the rapid support forces that moved on the Sudanese armed forces at first, but essentially they're both making their power play, and so they started fighting each other. And the result has been a brutal civil war, rape, killing, displacement, hunger. We're looking at tens of thousands of people killed. At the very least, I personally think it's probably in the hundreds of thousands at this point. We don't even know actually how many people are dead. We can only estimate. And millions displaced. And this is becoming a big problem in the rest of the region because displaced Sudanese are now moving into other African countries like Congo. So you basically have this flood of displaced people in the region. And essentially also, as was predictable, the Darfur genocide is basically starting back up. So it's essentially a giant catastrophe. It's, the Sudanese masses struggled for civilian rule against decades of military dictatorship. And what they got for that was a power struggle between essentially two warlords that has basically destroyed their society.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about immigration and stuff, it's interesting because the leaving Sudanese have to go through Chad, which is a failed state. We have to go through the Central African Republic, which is in a civil war.
Yeah.
Or they have to go through South Sudan because they would have to go through CAR or South Sudan to get to the Congo. They could also go to they could also go to Libya, but that's also in a civil war. But they could go into Ethiopia or Eritrea. I mean, it's not looking good. I mean, people have been predicting forever that Sudan will balkanize.
Yeah.
Ever since 2011, the South Sudan cowboy hat president that seceded and everything, which South Sudan within a few years had its own civil war. Sudan is split between the north, it's Muslim, the south was Christian. That was a big tension. There's also a lot of ethnic and tribal conflicts. But yeah, I mean, the people keep saying like, oh, Darfur will leave. I'm not too sure Darfur will leave by itself. I think it'll actually take if there is more splitting, it'll either be like down the middle, or it'll be Darfur and I'm mispronouncing this, Kordofan will join together, become a state. Because I don't think Darfur could like really be its own. There's not a lot in Darfur. Like, there's not a lot of natural. I mean, well, there is, but there's not a lot. I guess, I don't know. Niger exists, and there's not really much going on there other than uranium. But so yeah, I mean, it could split again down the middle. Yeah, Sudan is just never talked about. I mean, if it is, I think people waffle. It's Sudan. It's, it'll never stabilize. It'll always be I mean, it's interesting because these big conflicts, there's always like a ton of private interests who are backing one side or the other so they can get access to like mineral rights or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Which is what's happening in the Rwandan Congo war. Well, it's funny. Not actually funny, but the East African Federation plan is dead. Like, it's never been more dead ever since for what, like...
Yeah, I remember back in, like, fucking, 2 years ago, you were like, oh, they're gonna do African Federation. They're gonna do big African state. And I'm like, nah, dude. That's just balkanizing.
I think if they're gonna do it, it should be Kenya and Tanzania. That's it, because you cannot. Like Rwanda and Burundi both have. Rwanda is, I want to say Tutsi. The other one is Hutu. Like there's still that Tutsi Hutu thing going on in Rwanda and Burundi, and I don't know why they did this, but the East African community accepted South Sudan and Somalia and Congo into the unification plans, and Somalia is not even like a coherent state. It's a bunch of different microstates that are like loosely together as a confederation.
Actually,
Um,
Somalia is an anarchist society.
like the Somali government only controls like the middle, like the center region of Somalia. So there's that. I mean, also adding South Sudan doesn't. I mean, South Sudan was just born. Like it's just gonna like okay, yeah, it's not gonna. I mean, the East African Federation's not. There's like everything going against it. I remember the Ugandan president was like, "Yeah, it's a great idea." It's like, is it? Do you say that because you want to be president of like a bigger state? Because you've been the Ugandan president for like 30 whatever years.
Well, the thing you said about the minerals is an important dimension of this conflict that also doesn't get talked about much, which is that the conflict is not. It's not like the conflict isn't just the result of the fact that basically in the form of the commander of the Sudanese armed forces, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the commander of the RSF, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti, being warlords and wanting power for themselves. That's a part of it, right? But there's also the fact that both armies are supported by foreign powers as far afield. Basically, we're talking about Arab states and going all the way to China, backed by foreign powers for the purpose of taking control of territories in which you have essentially the mining of natural resources, in particular gold. And in fact, the United Arab Emirates is a big player in this because basically all that gold is being realized in UAE markets. Even ultimately, through Egypt's participation, when Egypt gets the gold to profit on it, they have to realize that gold in UAE markets as well. So it's essentially the UAE is forming this big center of gravity for gold as a commodity in its domestic economy, and it's been accused as a result of supporting, basically fueling, providing resources to the Civil War, in particular the RSF, and it's denied this, but it's definitely doing it, right? So a big part of this is this dynamic where essentially other nation states in the capitalist world economy are fueling this conflict in order to extract Sudanese resources for their own profits. And so essentially the natural resources of Sudan are being used to strangle the Sudanese people to death. And, so nothing sort of is a bigger testament to the sort of post-colonial horror contemporary capitalism than the Sudanese Civil War.
I mean, a part of another thing why Sudan is kind of important is because it has a border to the Red Sea, and the Red Sea is a major trading hub.
That's also true.
Like that's Suez Canal and everything. That's why like Saudi Arabia has claimed a lot of its wealth is the fact that it has like territory along a lot of the territory along the Red Sea, and then so yeah, I mean, whoever has control of that like coastal area is a player in a major trading area. So yeah, I'm not surprised that the UAE is doing that. I always knew something was up with the UAE. Anyways, yeah, just all sorts of wonderful things are happening in the world. What a wonderful world! Yay!
Yes.
Peachy. Yeah, is that about it? I think I talked a little bit about the Sudan Civil War. I mean, it's interesting because Sudan was ran by like a Nasserist, and then it was ran by what they call an Islamist, and then it's ran by warlords. So,
it's interesting. Another interesting dynamic of the conflict is that, like, both sides are using Sudanese democracy as like their justificatory rhetoric. Essentially these warlords are fighting it out, destroying lives of, millions of Sudanese people, and they're doing it with this justification. Oh, the other guy, he's trying to destroy Sudanese democracy. I'm defending Sudanese democracy. It's like the most cynical, like, nonsense you'll ever see in your life.
Okay, is that it? So that's the dam?
Yeah.
You're not going to forget anything else? We're not going to end the recording? You're like, I forgot that, blah, 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 blah.
No.
I forgot to also say how cool the South Sudanese president's cowboy hat is. I forgot to comment how cool that I also think that is.
No. Okay.
If I remember correctly, his vice president was like, the South Sudan president was like, vice president, I think you're a traitor. And the vice president told him no and then ran off. So anyway, I think that's it. I think we're words of the day. You know what? Piper, you should do the random. Let's say 3 random words or cons. It's your turn. Let's see what you got.
Okay, Steve with the cowboy hat riding a tortoise.
Okay, that two more things. That's one thing.
Oh, how many do they have to be?
Just 2 more. Just say 2 more. Just.
Oh, I thought it was word. Okay. Magic hippo farts.
I have to find the images for these. I'm just gonna have an image of a hippo. I don't know what magic hippo farts look like.
Put a lizard hat on it, and the male angler fish energy.
Sure, yeah, I know where that is on Google Images. Sure, why not? Sure, male angler fish energy. I don't know what that means. My life.
That moment when you become like a ball sack for your girlfriend.
That's pleasant. All right. Post comprehension, YouTube, Patreon, Piper Tompkins, Patreon, YouTube. Subscribe over to here. Episodes were bi-weekly. Now they're whenever we feel like it. And thank you. That's all from being Last Words Piper.
Free Palestine.
Here's the Uncle Ralph's